welcome everyone to today's training. Um, we're hosted by Rails to Trails Conservancy's Changemakers for Trails initiative. For those of you who are just joining us, we're just getting started. My name is Scott Goldstein. I'm the Senior Director of Government Relations here at Rails to Trails, and I'll be your moderator and one of your presenters today. The topic for today's training is Power in Numbers, Building Grassroots Partnerships in Your Community. During this training, you will hear from individuals who have been successful in activating community members and engaging key players, including elected officials, to develop trail infrastructure in their region. We are thrilled to be joined by Dr. Rose Gowan and Sherry Parkhurst for tonight's training to hear how they successfully developed grassroots partnerships to achieve their trail vision. Dr. Gowan is the former city commissioner of Brownsville, Texas, and co-founder of the Cara Cara Trails. With a background in medicine, Rose's motivation for developing the West Rail Trail in Brownsville, Texas, was improving health outcomes by increasing physical activity in her region. Sherry Parkhurst is an RTC changemaker who is spearheading the 10 Tom Bike Trail in Monroe County, Mississippi. After returning to Amory, Mississippi after several years, Sherry was shocked by the declining safety conditions for bicyclists and pedestrians. To reclaim safe spaces to walk, bike, and roll in Amory, Sherry began making connections to develop a trail from Amory to Smithville. There's so much to learn from both of their stories. And I can tell you that that is absolutely true because we did a session earlier this week with both of them, and you're going to be thrilled with their comments. Wonderful. So before we get to Rose and Sherry, we're going to go over a couple um, of things from the Rails to Trails perspective just to set the table. First, we want to just go over the various different types of advocacy because there are many ways to advocate and to get involved in with decision makers and to make an impact. Um, so there's really three main ways. The first is what we call everyday advocacy and online engagement. So that means introducing your network to trails, sharing on social media, telling your story about why trails matter. Basically, just the things you do every day as you use trails and enjoy trails. You talk about it. You share it with your networks, and that helps your networks see what you're seeing and the joy and the other things that give you reason to care about trails. Another type of advocacy is community advocacy and events on trails. So this means holding events where you live, formally organizing supporters through maybe petitions or attending community meetings. So a little bit of a step up from just that everyday, I love trails, I took a great ride or a walk today. Now you're holding an event. Now you're inviting your friends and your neighbors to come to the trail. You're maybe doing a petition on your social media or whatever it might be. So taking that additional step to organize your community and hold events. And then the last type of advocacy is direct advocacy, and that's talking directly to decision makers and policymakers. So you can attend meetings with officials, and there's all different types of city and county and state level meetings that you can attend. You can set up direct meetings with your officials in their offices or invite them out to a trail. And you can also write to them directly or via letters to the editor and being in press materials. And so there are many different ways to advocate. The right way for you might be one or another of these or some combination, but we just want to set that table with, advocacy can take many forms and it doesn't have to be a high barrier to entry. Next slide, please. So grassroots partnerships matter for many, many reasons, but for advocacy, grassroots partnerships are really essential to driving progress and change, not just for trails, but for all types of advocacy. And so we just want to give you some examples of ways in which grassroots partnerships have been successful that you might have heard about. So, for example, most of us are familiar with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. That was a grassroots partnership that became a national movement. There were recent efforts to sell off public lands, and grassroots communities came together to build support for public lands and push back on that proposal. Um, and even your local parent-teacher associations. These are grassroots partnerships that are in local communities and have a national and local and statewide reach. And so we just want to give you ways of thinking about, how you can start in your community and it can deliver tremendous impact, even if you start small. Yeah, next slide. Thank you. So how to organize in your community. We'll give you a couple of examples here, and when you hear the presentations from Sherry and Rose, you're going to hear a lot of this reflected in their work. Um, First, you can start with a core group. This could be your friends or your neighbors. You have a shared goal and you have shared values, and so you bring that group together and think about what you have in common, what you might want to accomplish. Um, Then you can map out your relationships. So you've got your core group, and then you think about who do we know? Does this person perhaps know somebody in the local media or a city council member or some other policymaker or just an influential civic a member like the coach of the local football team or whatever it might be. So think about who do you know? Who do does your core group know, and how might you engage with them? Um, and once you have that together, you think about partnering with other groups because trails and the work that you're doing are important for a wide variety of stakeholders in a community. And when you hear Rose, you'll hear her talking about the health community and how she brought that together. And so, think about partnering with groups that might have an interest in what you're doing or benefit from what you're doing, whether it's a business along the proposed trail or any other stakeholder. Try to find those alliances and expand your network, map out new relationships, and keep building. Um, so as part of that keeping building, you need to grow your contacts. And so you can use, traditional word of mouth, face-to-face meetings and convenings. You can certainly use social media and email. But whatever is the right way for you, you think about how you grow your contacts and add to that list of relationships and stakeholder groups as you build your network out. And then finally, of course, you have to take action. You've put your group together, you're growing your group, but you need to deliver and make progress. So you can do any one of the things we mentioned earlier. Hold an event, put together a petition, meet with your local officials, go to public meetings and speak up about trails. And so, again, these are just some examples. We'll hear more about some ways in which this really worked in Rose and Sherry's communities in a couple of minutes, but hopefully that's helpful in thinking about how to organize your community. Next slide, please. And as you're organizing your community, you should, we encourage you to think about creative partnerships. I mentioned earlier that Rose will talk about the health partnership that she built. And so in your community, think about who are the stakeholders that have influence that might have also an interest in what you're doing. And so we have a few examples up on the screen. These are certainly not the only creative partnerships that you could identify, but they're partnerships that we have seen be beneficial and productive around the country. So universities, utilities, public health stakeholders, and local economic development and tourism offices. Each of these and others in your community and around the country have different motivations for building and supporting trails, but ultimately the same goal is to build and support the trail and allow people to get out there and be active outdoors. And so we encourage you to think about who you might want to partner with as you're doing this work. Next slide, please. Okay, I think this is also the last slide before I turn it over to Rose. But this work matters. It's important to do. It matters, and it especially matters right now. And the reason we say it matters right now is because there are some very real threats to federal programs that support trail development. And in order to fight back on those and push back on those threats, it's important to have partnerships, to have advocates, and to advocate in new places. Um, those threats are from the federal level, but they're affecting the states and the localities because when federal funding changes and states and localities often change their approach to funding trails. In some states, but not all, the federal funding is the largest and sometimes the only source of dedicated funding for trails. So when federal programs change, it can really impact communities around the country. And so it's very important to advocate now. The other reason is it's time for Congress to write a new transportation bill, and that process is happening right now. They're going to have to approve a new bill in less than a year. And so, as we're pushing back on the threats that are out there to funding today, we're also trying to make sure that there's funding tomorrow. And so, we need decision makers to hear from you and from our community about trails. This will help them understand the support. It will inspire them to make change. Um, and then two other points to make. Unlike a lot of other issues with the trail community, there's not really a large corporate entity that is out there making the case for trails day to day across the country. This is really a people-powered grassroots movement. And so, in order to make a difference, we have to advocate and we have to power it as people who use this infrastructure. Um, and then finally, it works. The outreach inspires change, and it has, and it will again. The reason we have 42,000 miles of trails is because of advocacy all around the country, and in probably the communities that are represented on this call today. And the reason we're going to have many thousands more miles is because of ongoing advocacy. And so it's important to do it now. It works. And now I'm going to turn it over to Rose, who can tell you a really inspiring story about how this advocacy worked in her community in Brownsville. So take it away, Rose.
Thank you, Scott. Good evening, everyone. The West Rail Trail is a very poignant story took place in our city and is a battle or was a battle that was waged over 10 years. Next slide. To give you some perspectives, Texas is a big state, but we are at the very southern tip, at the Mexican Gulf Coast border where the Star is. So we're a very unique part of Texas. We are highly Hispanic. 85% of our people are Hispanic. And we are also a very low income area with very high rates. 1 in 3 of our people are diabetic. Next slide. Along with those sometimes sad facts are the rich ones, and that is a very highly culturally rich area, very family oriented, and very beautiful ecologically. We are a world birding haven because we are one of the primary fly zones for birds that are migrating north to south and south to north. And so environmentally, we are quite lovely. In 2008, it was decided to move the West Rail Line out of the city. Historically, there were 2 rail lines that came into the city, one on the east side and one on the west side, and they pretty much ran north to south. The east side had turned 20 plus, almost 30 years ago, into a trail because TxDOT needed to mediate some project they were doing back then, and they reached an agreement with the city to turn that corridor into a trail. Years went by, and eventually, as I said, in 2008, it was decided to move the west rails out of town, and the county was going to control that right of way. The right of way was then explained to the people of West Brownsville, and it was told to them that they intended to build an elevated tollway along that corridor. The people did not want that from the very moment they heard that. They felt that the railroad had divided their community, their neighborhoods for a century, and they no longer wanted it to be divided. The rail line had actually blocked in times of storms, or if a train broke down, it actually blocked off certain neighborhoods and they could not leave. And so they did not want a big freeway in place of the rail lines. The people started to talk to each other, organize themselves. They started going to churches and schools and PTA meetings and Rotary clubs and getting petitions to be signed so that they could then go to speak to the elected officials. Next slide. Right before I was elected the first time in 2009, I was in the council chambers when a man walked in carrying or pushing a wheelbarrow, and in the wheelbarrow was a huge stack of papers. He was delivering the 5,000 signed petitions to the city council that evening in protest of this corridor. The city quickly got on the side of the people and what they wanted. However, the county was very stubborn about their desire for a tollway, And so the city hosted over several years town halls like you see pictured here. They were all filled with people, 300 people. We would talk and listen to them. Very few people would say they wanted a road. Almost all in this room, if 90% or more, did not want a tollway or a road of any kind along that corridor. When I was elected in 2009, and part of the reason I decided to run for office was because of the passion that I saw in that wheelbarrow and the ability of them, the desire of them to speak to their elected officials about something that they cared about. So when I was elected, I also started to speak to the people and listen. And it was very clear, consistent for ensuing 10 years that they were very firm in what they wanted. Next slide. So back and forth between the city and the county, and event more petitions signed. There was an election for a county judge that was favored to go in the direction of a candidate that was for a tollway. And these folks organized themselves into the Friends of the West Rail Trail. You see many of them pictured here. And they actually identified another candidate that was running that was in favor of a trail, got behind him, and did block walking for him, put up signs for him, really turned the tide in the election of that county judge. And when they did that, they would do little events like this, where they would be standing on the corridor. The gravel they're standing on is the rail line after they remove the rails. And they would hold signs and ride their bikes there and do walk-ins along the corridor over and over again throughout these years, and especially during campaigns. Each time there was a city or county election, they made it their business to find out which candidates would favor a trail and which candidates wouldn't, and they would get behind the one that did. So next slide. So what did they do? Well, what should you do? How, when? Think about what you want. Build consensus. Knock on your neighbor's doors or your family's doors. Identify all the reasons why the project is a great idea. And I do mean all the reasons. If you go to your elected officials with one or two reasons why this trail is needed or wanted, it won't hold as much weight as if you go with half a dozen or a dozen reasons of different aspects. We could say, well, the health needs of this community means that accessible trails are needed. Kids need to walk to school. Seniors need to walk to a park that's nearby. And so trails were good for that reason. We could also say trail networks would be then an attraction to active tourists and bring in new money into the community. And then entrepreneurs would pop up along the corridor, opening restaurants or small bed and breakfasts and so forth. And so we went with a whole host of reasons as to why the trail would be important. Aim for their heart, always lead for their heart, because they will work harder for you and faster if it hits their heart. If you grab their heart, they'll actually help you figure out the other things because you've touched them. So tell a story. I remember we were passing an ordinance for a complete streets resolution. At the end of the talk, a young man in an electric wheelchair came up to the front to make a comment. And we were kind of nervous about what he was going to say. And he said, if you don't adopt complete streets and build this trail, I will be trapped in my home. I won't be able to get from point A to point B. And that really made an impact, grabbed everyone's heart in the room about the mobility and safety of his mobility at that time. It made passing the ordinance and the funding a lot easier. Plan public meetings. Doesn't have to be fancy. Go to where public meetings already are being held and see if you can say a word about what you're talking about. Social media, yard signs, t-shirts, schedule people to knock on doors or have a farmer's market booth or collect signatures after church. Never be afraid to ask tough questions because all they can say is no. In that case, you've lost nothing. Timing is everything. And it's very possible that the people that you have questions for in your city government or your city elected officials don't know any more than you do. In fact, since you've been working on the project, you very likely may know more than they do. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. Next slide. This is the ribbon cutting of the West Rail Trail 10 years after the fight began. The bicycle you see in the picture was one of a gentleman that was one of the original friends of the West Rail Trail. And he passed away, unfortunately, before he could get on the trail. So we always carry and display his bike whenever we're talking about the story or the path to this trail. Also pictured in the picture, I'm wearing the green t-shirt holding the scissors. Next to me is my good friend, County Commissioner Joey Lopez. We went to high school together, and part of the reason we finally accomplished the compromise to create the trail was because we knew each other so well, we were able to talk to each other and come to a compromise of the 8-mile corridor being 6 miles of only trail and 2 miles with an at-grade road and an adjacent off-road trail. Next slide. So that's the end of the West Rail Trail story. Don't give up. Talk to people. Believe that you can, and do your homework. That's the best advice.
That is great advice. Thank you so much, Rose. That was fantastic. Um, so next, we're going to hear from Sherry Parkhurst about how she jump-started her vision for the 10 Tom Bike Trail in Monroe County, Mississippi. Over to you, Sherry.
Thank you, and thanks for having me here tonight. This is a subject that I have a huge passion for, and it stems from the safety aspect. When we were here, when I raised my kids, we were able to ride our bikes everywhere. And when I moved back here 20 years later, that was not the case. And it was kind of terrifying with all the cell phones and the distracted drivers and that kind of thing. So I went in search of a place to find safe biking. And we have a railroad here that goes from Fulton, Mississippi to Amory, Mississippi, which is about 30 miles. So I thought that'd be a great trail. And I went to and asked if are you going to retire that railroad anytime? And he said no. So I just back to square one, and I just happened to be on the west bank of the waterway, and I saw a road, and that road is now it's a gravel road, and people are allowed to walk it, ride it, or whatever. There's just no four-wheel vehicles allowed on it, which is a plus. So I went to the Corps of Engineers and just asked the question, what's the chances we could get a bike trail built? And they said, well, we don't have the money to build it and we don't have the money to maintain it, but if you find those things, you're welcome to do that. So that just, they didn't say no. That's the big thing, and to me, that was a big yes. So I started talking to people, and I talked to our congressman, Trent Kelly's office, and they were behind it. I talked to the Corps asked me to get three things: a concept letter and endorsement letters from other people, and also a drawing. And endorsements were easy because everybody thought it was a great idea, especially people who had had close encounters with the four-wheel vehicles. A surgeon that I had seen for my shoulder had gotten hit during COVID, and many stories like that. But the thing that threw me was the drawing. I was pretty sure they didn't want me to do it. So I called a civil engineering group, and just so happened that the guy that I talked to was our county engineer. And then he said, you need to be hooked up with a municipality. So I went to our county administrator, who just happened to be a former cyclist, and it just snowballed. It was everybody was behind it. He just happened to be talking to the consulting group that does the grants for Monroe County and out of Brandon, Mississippi, and his name is Chris. And Chris has a father-in-law who has B&Bs on the Tanglefoot, which is what we're kind of modeling after. And he said the economic impact of this was phenomenal. And I said, and that's wonderful. If that's what it takes to get it built, then that's what we want to do. So we put that on our agenda. When I spoke to a doctor about being on my board for the 501c3, he said the recruiting potential and the health potential is out the roof for this. And I was like, great, whatever it takes to get it built. So we gather people like that and people who see a bigger vision for it than just a little old grandmother trying to figure somewhere safe for her kids to ride. But it's really kind of taken off, and I've gotten a lot of results. I've spoken to our state senator and our local senators and our the congressman, as I spoke to earlier, and everybody's in agreement. So it's just a matter of funding. and the Corps of Engineers is in agreement, but they have those hoops that you have to jump through. In the far distance, you'll see the bridge that goes over the very beginning of our trailhead right there. And there's some uprights that are going to have the mural that was the first picture that you saw, welcoming everybody to the 10-ton bike trail. This is it's a whole wonderful roadbed right there, and it's just sitting on the west bank of the waterway, and it's owned by the Corps of Engineers, and it's federal property, so that's why we qualify for Rails to Trails. And it's just it's just like I said, a matter of money right now. But back to what Rose was saying about developing relationships and talking to people. Everybody I talked to has sent me to the next person that I needed to talk to. And so they also have given me little tidbits of information. So I sound a lot more intelligent when I talk to those next people than I actually am. But there's a lot of things that I wasn't aware of as far as the waterway goes, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and that kind of thing, and where the boat ramps are, and a lot of things like that. But I've been schooled on a lot of that and pass that information on to the next person. So it's been great. And we've put in for a grant, what they call a Federal Lands Access Program grant, FLAP, and it's for the first 7 miles. And then we have two spillways we have to cross. And initially, we were thinking a suspension bridge, which will be very, very pricey. And when we went to the Corps of Engineers, they actually came with a solution that was a lot less money. And he said, if you go downstream, you can build what you want to across there. Okay, we'll do that. It's a little bit of working with them, and they're easy to work with. They just have those federal hoops that you have to jump through. So,
What a great story. Thank you both for sharing stories about your community and some really wonderful pictures about so we can see and try to experience what you experience in your community. Um, so we're gonna dive into some questions. I've got a few to start off with, but I want to encourage folks in the audience to put your questions in the chat. You can do so throughout the Q&A portion. And so please don't hesitate. There are only good questions, and we look forward to hearing from you. But the first question to get us started for both panelists is what resources did you use to engage in this work, and how did you get started?
So I got started because I'm a doctor, and I got involved in an initiative to start up to bring back a farmers market to our community. And in that initiative, I learned about the extremely high rates of diabetes, and I thought, well, there's not much I can do seeing one patient at a time, but if I want to reach my whole community, I need to start thinking on a population level. And that led me to run for office and try to increase people's physical activity levels. Resources, I had none. Just 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 the concept that I wanted to help my people and improve their health.
well, I too had no resources, so it was on my dime for quite a bit of it. And I went to all the counties that are involved. I went to their board of supervisors meeting and talked to them, and then I talked to our local people and just kept talking. Recently, I spoke to Skip Skaggs, who is our executive director of our North Mississippi Economic Industrial Impact Association. It takes me a minute to get all those initials, but anyway, he said, "Have you spoken to Blue Cross Blue Shield?" I said, "No." And he said, "Have you spoken to TVA?" I said, "No." I said, "That's why I'm talking to you, because I don't have those contacts. You need to give me the contacts." And he has. I've spoken to TVA, and one of my local senators is talking to Blue Cross Blue Shield for me. So it's who you know and who you get to know, and just ask the question.
I love that. I remember when we first talked about this, hearing that you didn't have any resources to get started, but it was just your own get up and go, and your drive to see this vision become reality. And so I think that I just wanted to uplift that because I think some people might feel like, well, to run a campaign to be successful, I have to have backing with financial resources, and you really don't. You just have to have the motivation and the desire and the energy. And so um, I wanted to build on that and just see if you all could talk about your motivation for doing this work. Rose, I know you talked about your background in health. So I don't know if there's anything more you want to say there, Sherry. I know you mentioned safety, but I recall how important that was empowering through not having any resources and sort of not knowing where to start, but you had the motivation and you wanted to get to an outcome. And just curious if you can speak a little bit more about that.
Well, the more I kept asking questions, as Sherry said, I found out more and I met more people and developed more partners. And I remember once on a related issue, I was trying to help with the farmers market opening up, and we wrote a grant for that at the city, and it was denied. And I was talking to the planning director about an issue with a trail that we were trying to build at the time. And he said, "Oh, you need to write to Senator so and so." Well, he wasn't even our district, our senator. He was from a different state senator from a different district, far from us. And I said, "Why would I do that? He's not even our representative." He said, "Because he loves agriculture. His family's into agriculture, and so on and so forth." So out of the coldness, I wrote to this gentleman, and a week later they overturned the grant and we were awarded it. So a resource I didn't know where to look. This guy wasn't even my representative. But if I hadn't made that, asked those questions and made those contacts, I wouldn't have made that connection. And so the more I learned, the more I found out, well, you know what, there's a piece of health in this initiative and that initiative and that initiative. And then those started piling up until every time there was a city commission meeting, I could find a piece of health or a piece of a trail related issue in almost anything that came before the commission.
That's true. And like I mentioned before, just everybody sent me to somebody else, the next step that I needed, the next hurdle that I needed. And speaking of the civil engineering group, is who I talked to about the drawing that the Corps asked me to get. They asked me to get three things: concept letter, endorsement letters, and a drawing. Well, I couldn't do a drawing. I'm pretty sure they didn't want me to do it. So I went to them, and he was our county engineer. And he said, "You're going to have to talk to the county administrator." And the county administrator loved biking. And so it went on like that. And he brought the next person and the next person. And then we went to all the board meetings, and the word spread. I talked to the Economic Development Council girls and the tourism girls all along the way. And those girls are cheerleaders. They know what the areas need, and they will get it done, and they'll help you. And
That's
then having Horn Consulting, who is the grant writers for our county, has been a big plus too.
that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. I think it also kind of dovetails into our next question, um, which is about, or which is, what advice do you have for building a relationship with decision makers, whether elected or other decision makers? And as part of that, do you need to travel to them, to the state capitol, or can you engage from wherever you might be? And so, if I recall, part of building advice was to bring that motivation and that passion and try to build a relationship in talking with them. So I'll let you all take it from here, but I think it dovetails nicely from where we were to where we're going. So take it away.
Well, I always say start local because that's where your trail is. It's local. And you kind of don't you want to go to the state with already your local support in your hat as opposed to the other way around. So start local. You know, as your local council people, they take emails, they take phone calls, and if you are shy about going to talk to them in person, send them an email. The more people that send them an email on one particular issue, the more they pay attention and they're much more interested in actually meeting face to face. Talk to them like you would talk to one of the neighbors or one of the other advocates in your group. They're just regular people trying to do something good for their community. And when that momentum builds, then you have something to go to the state level with and so forth.
Oh, I agree with that totally. I spoke to our new mayor here in Amory, because Amory is just sits on one side of the waterway and our trail sits on the other. So our trail's not going to go through Amory, but we will benefit as a trailhead. And the new mayor was very much behind it, and talking to the new alderman, everybody, the ones that have been there for a long time, they don't seem to be as interested in building new things. Even the boards of supervisors that have been there for a long time, they're worried about building their roads and not necessarily about this kind of thing. And they don't realize what it'll bring to the area, which is phenomenal. Because if you look at the numbers for our closest one, which is the Tanglefoot, millions of dollars have been brought to that area just from that trail. And we need that here. We're not only high in diabetes, but we're low in money in the area. So it's going to benefit everybody. It's going to bring jobs. It's going to make people want to come to this area because there's those facilities. We don't have that. And some of these people just haven't seen that, and they should.
Um, can I just expand on that a little bit when you're starting local, Rose, or when you're talking to your new mayor, Sherry, how do you overcome that? Some people are sort of like, well, I don't know how to call the mayor. I don't know him or her. Or, when it's time to go to my state official, I don't know who that is, or I don't know where their office is. And they've got a big, important job. And so how do you kind of overcome that barrier? They are just people like you said, Rose, but any tips on how you just overcome that barrier and build that connection with somebody in an important position that you may not know?
Well, you can always go to a city council meeting and watch, see, learn their faces, learn their names. And at that city council meeting, there's always a city secretary. So at the break or after the meeting or even before the meeting, you can say, how do I reach the mayor or the council people? And they'll give you the instructions on where to find the emails and so forth like that. So that's one way that you can do it. The other way, and I can't stress this enough, is to remember that just because they put their name on a ballot and ran does not mean that they are more smarter than you or more elite than you. They're just regular people. And they want to communicate with you, especially if they have any hope of being reelected. They want to have a connection to the people. But you can start by going to the city council and watching and listen to how they talk and find their contacts directly. And you can be fairly anonymous in the audience when you do that.
I'm more of a face-to-face person. I want to see them. It's hard for them to tell me no when I'm in person. So, I get 15 to 30 minutes of their time, and according to our county administrator, I have a passion about me that just people want to do it once they see it, because it is a passion. It is, you can see the excitement when I'm talking about it. And unfortunately, with a Southern drawl, I talk really fast, so you have to listen fast. But I have plans. I had spoken to one of the other partners about going up to see the senators in DC. I've spoken to their offices local, but he thought it'd be a great idea for me to go up there and see them in person in their offices. I'm good with that. I have no fear anymore. I just, like you say, they can't, if they say no, whatever, we'll go to the next person. But they don't usually say no. They just say, well, let's see what we can do.
That's great. Um, we have time for, I think, maybe one or two more questions. We had one come into the chat. The question is regarding rail trails. Some skeptics argue that they don't want people trespassing, quote unquote, trespassing on their land. And what are a couple of strong counterpoints to help allay their concerns? I certainly have some thoughts to offer, but want to see if you all have any feedback as folks who've actually gotten trails built in your communities.
Well, here we have in the past gotten questions like, well, I don't want people staring in my backyard, and they might come back and steal my lawnmower and stuff like that. But studies have shown that the more eyes on the trail, the safer the location. So we locally have not seen an increase in crime along our trails at all. But there's more people there. There's more people using it. It's often lit if we have the funding to light the trail. And so that has not been a problem. In terms of if you're out in the country and people are using an abandoned rail line to build a trail, we haven't had that experience in Brownsville, so I can't really speak to that. But it is public money that went in to build that railroad, and using that public money to continue a mode of transportation through that corridor does seem to make logical sense to me.
Well, we are on federal property in a very, very, very rural area, so we're not going to be going through anybody's property. But I have heard people say things like that. And what about the litter and that kind of stuff? And my response was, cyclists are not known to be big litter bugs, but we will manage that. Most of the time, cyclists tend to be more environmentally correct than most of us. And we will have wildlife that they can see. When we rode the trail with the Corps of Engineers, we saw a bald eagle carrying a fish in his talons. That was so awesome. And a bunch of deer, a bunch of turkeys, and those feral hogs that people always keep warning us about, but they were being harvested. They were not bothering anybody. But, I want people to do that. We plan to enhance the wildlife habitats and that kind of thing, because some people don't ever get the opportunity to see that kind of thing.
That's great. And I just want to offer um, from Rails to Trails, we have what we call the Trail Building Toolbox, and you can find it on our website. And we can, I think, put a link in the chat. We also have something we call the Trail Nation Playbook. And I refer to both of those things because you'll see in both of those documents strategies for fencing, lighting, other design elements that help make sure that the trail is safe and works for everybody who is using it and who lives near it. Community engagement is a huge part of developing a trail. And as part of community engagement, you understand what the desires and the concerns are from the community using and living near and around the trail. And then you can start to do those design elements to mitigate those issues. And so there's a variety of strategies that have been used all over the country, whether in urban, suburban, or rural places. While you can never please everybody all the time, we find that trails are certainly popular, that they're safe, and that they are well liked all over the country. So hopefully you can take advantage of those tools that we have on our website. And if you have further questions, you can always reach out to Rails to Trails as well. Um, I think we have time for one other question. And so that question is, you've got your network, you've got your motivation, you're talking to lawmakers, you're starting to make some inroads in the community, and you've got some inertia, but you still eventually you do need money to build a trail. And so how do you learn where money is available, and where do you go to start accessing funds to actually move the trail forward?
Well, for state or federal dollars, you can talk to your local NPO who know about those types of programs. You can talk to your state and federal reps and senators. They have staffers that will know that, or if they don't know, they can find out for you. But there's also private philanthropy. So learn who your philanthropists are in your region. Do you live in an oil area where there are a lot of oil companies that enjoy giving back to the community? Do you live in an area where the Walmart Foundation, in Sherry mentioned on our last session, that likes trails, and they happen to give philanthropically to trails in different parts of the country. Find out who your philanthropists are in your area, and then maybe talk to a grant writer or two who they have ways of finding searches. There are programs that they use to search for grants in certain with certain topics, so they can search trails or that type of thing, and they will come up with a whole list of prospects there for you as well.
Well, we were blessed to be able to work with the county. Like I mentioned Horn Consulting. Our board of supervisors allowed us to do that. And so that helped us with that first grant. And they've got a couple more that they're going to be working on too. In the meantime, I've been doing some fundraisers, selling chances on different things. And we have a list of things that people can buy benches or sponsor the spillway and that kind of thing. However much money they want to give, we can give them some recognition for that if they want it. So, and we're going to need all those things. We're going to need mile markers and we're going to need benches. So we're asking for those things as well.
I could not agree more with what you both just said about how to find resources. But I want to add one additional point, which is that you can always, because we're talking about advocacy here, right? And petitioning your lawmakers, you can always petition that they create resources that don't currently exist. And so We have federal programs that didn't exist until trail advocates came and said, we need help around the country. And we have state and local programs all over the country that didn't exist until trail advocates said, we need these programs. And so, in addition to everything you all said, I just wanted to offer that the people who power this movement have been successful in generating funding and keeping that funding alive. And so, if you're in a state that doesn't have a funding mechanism, it is not too late to create that. And you can take advantage of additional funding once you've done that. So, the various tools I mentioned from Rails to Trails will also offer thoughts on how you can leverage state and philanthropic and federal dollars for trails. And so, I hope folks on this call will take advantage of that. But we also know that folks on this call are busy and you have lives and you have things to do. And we said we would wrap up by 8 o'clock. So I have to have the unfortunate responsibility of moving us along. And so, um, as a reminder, when you leave today's training, a short survey will pop up on your screen. Please provide feedback and recommend advocacy topics that you want to learn more about in future sessions. We'll also send you a follow-up email with the recording, with the slides, and the resources mentioned during the training, and you should get that in the coming days. But we really, really do value what you send to us and the feedback you provide, and it informs what we do and the resources that we provide back to you. So please do share your honest feedback. Um, we have an upcoming webinar related to advocating at the state level that may be of interest to some of you. That webinar is called Innovative State Legislative Approaches Addressing a Challenging Environment. It will cover best practices for building a state legislative agenda focused on achieving policy wins and funding for active transportation. And you can learn more about this session and register using the link that should be in the chat. I want to give a big, huge, heartfelt thank you to Sherry and Rose for joining us, and an equally big and heartfelt thank you to each one of you for being on this webinar. We had a few closing slides that we want to share as we wrap things up. To reiterate, this is a unique moment for advocacy. Decisions about trails are being made at every level of government. And I mentioned earlier the federal, not just the threat to existing funding that's out there, but also the uncertainty about the future as Congress writes another transportation bill. And that will have enormous impacts on the resources available in your state and in your community. Um, and as that process is underway, state legislative sessions are going to be convening in the weeks and months ahead. And they will be taking up trail-related legislation, and they will be creating new funding streams, as I mentioned earlier, or addressing other streams, and they will be responding to whatever Congress is doing. And so we work at both the federal and the state level, and we want to work with you. And so please do let us know how we can be helpful to you in your state, and please do. We will be sending information about what's going on in Congress, and we hope you will take action and follow up with us if you have any questions. Next slide, please. RTC's role in this whole advocacy process, we try to bring people together around the shared vision of a nation connected by trails. And so we do sessions like tonight where we provide resources. We work with individuals and groups. We have the technical assistance. We have the Trail Nation toolbox and the Trail Nation playbook that I mentioned earlier. And we will be providing advocacy resources via email. And so we want to partner with you in any way that makes the most sense. And we also want to be your eyes and ears at the federal level and your partner at the state level. We have a network of partners. We work across all political aisles, and we have upcoming advocacy events. So look out for one I want to lift up is called Celebrate Trails Day. It's a nationwide advocacy event happening next year. And we will be putting out best practices on an ongoing basis, and we hope you will take advantage of them and give us feedback as we work to improve. Next slide, please. So here are 4 things that you as changemakers can do to influence how federal, state, and local officials prioritize trails. Number 1, you can meet with your federal representative or their staff in the district, and Rails to Trails will help you. Sherry mentioned coming all the way to Washington, and that is wonderful. We will help you if you do that as well. But if you can't afford or don't have time to come all the way to Washington, we will help you set up a meeting in your district. So let us know. And if you want to do it without our help, that's great too. We encourage you to do it however you'd like to have that meeting. So states I mentioned are going to be convening their legislatures soon. And so we want to help you at the state level as well. We have a team across the country working in states, advancing trail supportive funding and policy. And so let us know if there's something that you're thinking about in your state, or if you have any questions, and we'll be glad to be a resource there. Um, we have a petition. There should be a link to that in the chat and in the emails that we'll send you afterwards. We hope you will sign it and demonstrate your support for Trails to all of your elected officials. Um, and then invite your elected officials at any level of government, local, state, or federal, to join you out on a trail. There's nothing more impactful than having them walk, bike, roll on the trail, see, feel, and touch the trail, and hear from people who are out there enjoying it, who are going to be their constituents and their neighbors. And so we encourage you to invite your public officials to join you out on the trail. Next slide, please. Yes, what's next? So just building on what I've already mentioned, we encourage you to take action. We have social media. If you do social media, we hope you'll tag us and we will uplift that. I mentioned earlier that letters to the editor is a great way to do advocacy, and we encourage that, and we'll help you if you have any questions about that. And so also to reiterate, community meetings, events on the trail, meetings with elected officials. You've heard from Sherry and Rose about how these are very achievable outcomes, and your elected officials are people like you and I, and approachable, and we encourage you to engage with them. I mentioned a few advocacy events that we have coming up. So Celebrate Trails Day Advocacy webinar will be in early 2026, and this will tell you all about what you need to set up a Celebrate Trails Day event. Celebrate Trails Day will be on April 25th, 2026. So I hope you'll mark your calendar, and we'll send you an invite to our advocacy webinar before the event, so you'll know all about what you need to have a really effective and successful Celebrate Trails Day in your community. And then sign up to be part of the team to attend meetings with elected officials. So I'm just reiterating what I've mentioned earlier. Let us know how we can help you support your efforts to meet with elected officials in your community. So next slide, please. Yes, the best part. Thank you again. It's been such a pleasure. Rose and Sherry, you are fantastic. Thank you everyone for spending an hour of your evening with us. But I think with that, we will wish you a very wonderful evening, and hope to talk to you soon.